And there we are talking about trauma and what it is. Trauma is a whole body response to extreme stress that overwhelms our ability to cope and continues on even after danger is past. Whatever danger our body perceives that we are in. A traumatic event is not necessarily the event itself. It is the experience that a person has of an event. So let me say that again. Trauma is not an event. Trauma is the experience of an event that a person has. For instance, we could have a car full of people and we have a car accident, a fender bender, a minor one. But everybody in that car is going to have a slightly different experience of that fender bender. While 4 out of 5 people may be able to cope with the stress of that event, maybe there's a 5th person in that car for whom which that event is traumatic based on their experience, mostly given what their coping mechanisms are able to handle in that given situation. And that's dependent on a lot of factors, right? What kind of stress have we been under over the long haul when we experience any kind of event? One person will experience it one way and be able to cope with it just fine, while another person is going to experience that as a traumatic event. What does that mean? Well, generally, trauma is something that continues, again, after the event has passed and continues to interfere with our life. So our ability to laugh, right? Because we are constantly being bombarded maybe with the emotions and the memories of that event. Our ability to have meaningful relationships perhaps, because the memories interfere with relationships and our ability to just be relaxed in a given situation, especially when we start talking about post-traumatic stress disorder and those kinds of things. Memories can be triggered by sights and smells and sounds and even just the feel of the body in the car, again, if we're using that same instance as a sort of case study. Often there are questions that endure. Like, how do I get out of this experience that I'm feeling in my body? Because this is something that gets trapped in the body. And we talk a little bit later on about how our bodies respond to stress. And when we get into a situation where we feel helpless, where we feel powerless, where we feel like we were out of control, where we had no voice, where maybe we should have responded differently, that's where trauma starts to take root. Trauma is a deep wound of the heart and mind, and often happens when we experience terrible events, but they may not be terrible events. It's again when we are overwhelmed with fear, with helplessness, and our normal coping strategies are not able to work. They're not able to help us feel safe, and it affects every part of us. It's the perception of being helpless, that maybe I'm about to die, or someone I love was about to die. I had an experience in the Grand Canyon where we had a woman after a 24-hour hike across the Grand Canyon could no longer walk. Her body was shutting down. We had to bring a stretcher 4 miles down to the bottom of the canyon and carry her out. For some people, that was an experience in which they could cope. For one person in particular, in her mind, it was as if we were pulling a dead body out of the Grand Canyon. We got her stabilized and she turned out to be just fine. Her nutrition was off, she was dehydrated, she was exhausted. But for one person in particular, it was as if we were pulling a dead body out of the canyon. And for her, that memory of watching us bring someone out of the canyon in a stretcher stuck in her mind. And it was a memory that she continued to return to. And in moments of stress in particular, that memory would come back up. She was feeling helpless. She was feeling out of control. She was feeling like we were in a life or death situation. And that's what trauma does. It hides out in the body and in the brain, and it locks us into a particular time and place and memory. Our memory tends to be chronological. You can go back over your life and talk about when things happened and at generally what age they happened and who was there. Trauma gets stuck non-chronologically, and it's almost as if we are always in that time and space and place. And whenever that memory gets triggered or our body experiences a similar thing, that comes right back to the forefront. And that's what trauma does. It traps us, isolates us, and makes us feel like we're alone. That's trauma.